Hello everyone, I'm Lawrence from Extra-P. Welcome to Module 8 of our Cairo Auditing course. In this module, I want to look more generally at what is involved in doing an audit. So we're going to look at some general features. We'll look then at the process. We'll look at the issue of how you can estimate the cost of doing an audit. And we'll finally look at how you can estimate the severity of risk of the vulnerabilities that you find. So there are some considerations that you need to take into account when you are doing an audit. The whole point of it is that you're going to be reviewing code and providing some reasonable assurance that the code is performing as expected and that it is free from vulnerabilities. But it's very important that you realize that no audit can guarantee that any code is bug-free. And it is important that you communicate this with your client. And miscommunication here could be quite problematic and put you at risk of liability. So it's better to say that you're making best efforts, that you are trying to find all possible vulnerabilities, but in general, in theory, there's no guarantee that any process would find all of the bugs. And it's a good idea when you write your audit report to have some kind of caveat about that and to explain that just so that there's no misunderstanding between you and the client and that their expectations are provided for there. Now, one important aspect of the audit process is that you will need to have a code freeze. This means there will be no changes to the code once you've started the audit. And this can be a little bit problematic. So it's important that you agree with your client that this is going to happen up front. Quite often, the client will want to make changes. So it's important to communicate with them and explain to them that this would be detrimental for the whole process. To audit a moving target is not going to work. And really, you should see the audit as being very much the final part of the development process. So it should be there when everything else has been done. If there are extra changes to be made, it is better that you delay the audit and then come back when the code really is complete and they have added everything that they want. So given that, what you will get when you start the audit is presumably a repo of the code, and then you will have a commit that you will be working from. And both these details should be in your report, so it is clear what the audit starting point is. A very useful piece of information that you could get from your client is some documentation about the expected behavior. And this is certainly not obvious. It is better if you get the client to describe the project, and obviously not just in a document, you can also talk to the client about this. But it is useful if you have some documentation that explains what the project is trying to do and explains what a good state for the project is and what is a bad state. And as I say, it's not always obvious what a bad state may be. And sometimes you will talk to the client and say you think you've found a vulnerability because a certain state could happen. And then the client will come back and say, well, actually, that's not a problem for us. We know that's perfectly fine. So it's important that you understand those aspects at the beginning so that you don't waste your time. It's also good to have some input from the business if that is available. And many of the vulnerabilities that we find, particularly if you're looking at something like a DeFi project, are concerned with business aspects of the protocol. So it's very useful if you have a good understanding of the business involved in the project. But the information that you would like would be what the application is trying to do, the or primary workflows through the application. Something very useful is to know the roles of the actors involved and what limitations are being put on access to the system. And then, as I've just been talking about, the states that need to be avoided. Now, excuse me, one point that could be problematic is if you find that maybe the specification is incorrect, or perhaps the way the application has been designed could lead to the possibility of it being exploited by the developers. And this is often referred to as a rug pull, where an application is built and the investors will put money into the application, and then the developers will take funds out and end the project. And it may well be that you can see this in the code, and this could be awkward. It could be awkward communicating this to the client. But I would say you always should do this if there is a possibility of this, and it goes hand in hand with issues of centralization as well. But if there is the possibility of developers or some type of administrator stealing funds from the users of the application, then this should be stated in your report. Otherwise, if you fail to mention it and this happens, then as an auditor, your reputation will fall. So you should always mention everything that you find as an auditor. And really, you're hiding or failing to disclose information in some ways is not beneficial to your client. As an auditor, you're doing the best job for your client when you find out every possible vulnerability you can and communicate that with the client. So having said that, what is the general process that we do? Well, you will have some team. The number of people in the team will depend probably on the size of the audit. There will be the process, which will end in some kind of debriefing session in the team, where you will pull together the vulnerabilities or the issues that you found, and to include those in the report. One way that I like to work is to start off with people working independently. I think this increases the chances of finding more issues. If you work together from the very start, I think that you tend to influence each other and you may then miss things. So I think some work by yourself initially is quite useful, and then we would typically come together and discuss the issues that we find and then use that to create a report. Of course, you will have your own way of working, and individual auditors will have their preferred way that they will want to audit the code. So it may well be best that you allow your team to do that rather than dictate a specific way to do that. I put the point in here, if you don't find any issues. This is extremely rare. Really, even in extremely well designed and written code, there will be some issues that you should find. And if you don't find any, then I think that will perhaps be an indication that you need to re-examine the process you're going through. Because it is extremely unlikely that you would find nothing. Perhaps you would want to use some different tools to help you that may throw up something, or just reevaluate your understanding of the project. So perhaps try to get a different view of how the project works and see if that can lead you into finding anything else. We've got an example there where of an audit. We've got an example report you can have a look at for flow protocol, which was one where we did find very few issues, but even with that code, which was extremely well written, there were some issues that we could find. Now, that initial part of the audit process is all about code inspection and possibly using some auditing tools, which we've already spoken about. And that is leading up to the first deliverable that you will have for your client, which is the initial report. And this report will be, it will state some general details about the audit, such as the commit that you're working from. It will give some indication of what the project is trying to achieve and some idea of the workflow of the project. But the majority of the report will be a list of issues that you have found in the report. And each of those issues should have a clear description of what the issue is, some example code if that is appropriate, how to reproduce the issue if that is not obvious, and also, if possible, a recommendation of how to fix the code. That may not always be possible, and very rarely, but it has happened occasionally that we've been unable to find a fix for a particular issue and have perhaps suggested that a more general thought should be given about the design of a project, perhaps to change the design of a project to avoid the way that a particular piece of code has been written. So that is what is going to form the initial report. And once you have given this to the client, they will then take that and decide what they would like to do about it. Now, there's some important issues here in that it's very much up to the client what they decide to do. You are making them aware of issues. You are providing them with recommendations. But how they react to those, what they want to do about that, is very much up to them. It could be that they accept everything you've said and all your recommendations, or it could be that they decide that they're not going to change some of the things that you have highlighted. Whatever, that's entirely up to them. But this will be part of what we've called here the remediation phase, where there is some time where the client can fix issues if they choose to do so. I should also say that when you are reporting the issues to the client, the style that you use, the wording that you use, should be very matter-of-fact and very neutral. You're not there to make any kind of judgment on the abilities of the developers. And if you write the report in a way that could be seen as offensive or derogatory, then they're unlikely to want to take your findings on board. So be very neutral about how you describe the issues you found. And if you can, yes, try to provide some recommendations of fixes for those issues. But either way, that will be the initial report, followed by the remediation phase. At the end of that, the client will come back to you and explain what they have done. You then do a second phase, auditing phase, where you go through the changes that they have made and check that they do address the issues that you highlighted. Usually this is a much smaller phase than the initial one. You should be able to do that relatively quickly. And then what you will produce after that is the final report, where you revisit all of the issues you mentioned in the initial report, and then you say what has been done about those. So it could be that you say the client fixed this and did fix that correctly, or maybe you would say the client was made aware of the issue but has decided not to do anything about it at this stage. Either way, that you will go through all of the issues, say what has been decided to be done about all of those issues, and then put that into a final report, which is the final deliverable that you have for the client. Of course, the process may not end there. It could be that you would also want to give some recommendations to the client about further things that they can do to help with security. For example, setting up a bug bounty program, or how they can monitor their code once it is in production. And this is, yes, the post-audit phase. So it's better not to see the final report as the final thing, but to be able to offer your clients other things as well, other ideas that they may find useful. And what you may well find is that if you've got a good relationship with your client, that this would just be the first audit of many, that they may well then come back at a later time and want to change their project, do an upgrade, and that you will be involved in auditing that also. Now, a question that is often asked about the process is, how do you decide the cost of an audit? If a client comes to you and you're going to give a quote to them of the cost of an audit and also the time that is needed, how do you come up with that figure? And I would say that this really should be based mostly on your own experience of auditing. You obviously have to be able to do it quite quickly, and you will need to see the code that is going to be audited in order to give an assessment of that. Now, there is one approach that some companies use, which is to look at the number of lines of code and maybe quote a number of dollars per line of code. I don't think that's a good metric. It may be good for a general idea, but I don't think it's a good way to give a firm estimate of the cost of an audit, because it says nothing about the complexity of that code or the complexity of the process or the business logic. And that more complex projects and projects with multiple contracts where there's maybe a lot of interaction between the contracts or maybe complex interaction will take longer, will be more costly to audit. So I think it is better to spend time going through the code, getting a better idea of the complexity. And I found these indicators can be quite useful to help you assess that. So looking at the number of external calls that are made in the contract, and because this is really the way that some attacker could get into your contract. So every extra external call is a new sort of pathway that you will need to inspect and to verify. So that's the public and external functions. And the external calls, these are interactions between the contracts, which could be fairly complex. And so you will need to spend time understanding those and making sure that they are safe. Once you've been working in a particular language or with a particular protocol for a while, you will get an idea of what are good patterns and what are not so good patterns. And so you should be able to use that and use your experience to give you an idea of what could be more complex and will take more time as opposed to what would be simpler. And also, if the way that the code has been written uses maybe some very unconventional solutions rather than using tried and tested solutions, this would be a general red flag when you're auditing anyway. You may want to raise this as an issue, but it could also be an indication that the auditing process is going to take longer anyway, and therefore that will mean increased cost. Another quite difficult aspect that you will need to do when you are producing the issues and writing your initial report is to give an indication of the severity of the issue that you have found. And this there are some sort of guidelines to help you with this. Although at the moment we don't really have too many standards in this area in Web3. And so if you look at different auditing companies, they will often have different categories in which they to show the risk. But what I think is useful is, one, to be consistent. So you should have a good idea of the categories that you are going to use and then use those consistently in your report. And also to document in the report what those categories mean and how you have come to put a particular issue in a particular category. Okay. Now, there are some standards that have come out of the Web 2 world, and there's notes about it here, so you can have a look at that. It's all about looking at things such as the ease of exploiting a vulnerability, and then also the impact that vulnerability could have, and those have some factors underlying them as well. So you will want to take those into account. It could well be that you will have seen similar issues in other projects, and so that may well also help guide your categorization. And as I say, there's not a necessarily established set of categories, but they tend to look something like this. You may have critical, major, minor, and informational. There may be one more category, or you may have them named slightly differently, but you would tend to have something similar to this. The top three there are more about the security, obviously, but as you're getting to the minor or the low risk issues, that is has less of a security impact, perhaps. And then the informational issues would tend to be there to show perhaps a better design or maybe an optimization that could be used, but perhaps one that wouldn't have any kind of security impact. Now, what I've said so far really applies to when you have a client audit. The situation, if you are in a competition, is a little bit different in that the categories will be supplied for you. The competition will have documented what categories are available for you to choose from. They will also have provided the criteria that you should use when you're deciding the risk category. And so if you're in a competition, you need to be very aware of those and make sure you follow those guidelines exactly. If you don't follow the guidelines, for example, if you put every issue that you found as critical when they clearly are not, then you're probably going to get your issues ignored for that. So if you're in a competition, make sure you clearly follow the documentation and follow that. Okay. Just as an example, there's Immunify's rating system is explained here. So you may want to create something similar to this for yourself, and then it's good practice then to put that in your report so that your clients can understand why you have chosen a particular severity for a certain issue. Okay. All right, so that's a little bit about the process of auditing generally. I hope that's useful for you. And that's the end of Module 8. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all in Module 9. Thanks, everyone.